The Lakewood Grand Hall glittered under the weight of its own opulence. A cathedral of wealth where gold-trimmed chandeliers cast a warm glow over polished marble floors. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, barely masking the undercurrent of ambition. Tonight, the hall buzzed with celebration, a gala honoring the promotion of Keziah's sister, Sophia. But for Keziah, a 28-year-old woman with partial hearing loss, the night was a stage where she'd been cast in a role she never auditioned for, the silent supporter. The invisible prop in someone else's spotlight. It began the moment she stepped through the arched entrance. Her navy coat a familiar shield against the world. Keziah had planned to slip in unnoticed, clap at the right moments, and leave before the small talk grew unbearable. But her mother, Evelyn, had other ideas. Kaz. Evelyn's voice sliced through the hum of the crowd, syrupy sweet with a razor's edge. Before Keziah could retreat, Evelyn steered her into a dim hallway near the coatroom and pressed a folded black polo shirt into her hands. Embroidered in white thread, Deaf Support Volunteer. Below it, a laminated lanyard with no name. They're short-staffed, Evelyn said, her eyes darting away. You'll help at the door. Check names. Hand out programs. It's simple. The shirt felt heavier than it should have, like it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken expectations. Keziah nodded, retreating to the restroom to change. The fabric clung too tightly, scratching her neck, and the nameless badge slapped against her chest with every step. She tucked her hair behind her ears, but it only made her feel more exposed. By the time she returned, the main entrance was alive with guests, heels clicking, laughter rising in waves. No one spared her a second glance. She handed out glossy brochures, checked off names, and waved at faces that didn't wave back. A young girl, maybe 7, paused and pointed at her badge. Is she really deaf? She asked her father. He didn't answer, just tugged her along, as if Keziah were part of the decor. Her hearing loss wasn't total, but in a room like this, with clinking champagne flutes and 100 voices ricocheting off velvet-lined walls, sound blurred into chaos. Keziah had mastered the art of faking it, reading lips, guessing context, laughing just late enough to seem included. But they loved that. Her family, her sister, her mother, they adored the image of her resilience, her quiet strength. They called it inspiring. Yet they never invited her to the table. They left her at the door, a gatekeeper to their glory. When Sophia arrived, she swept in like a queen claiming her throne. Her emerald gown shimmered under the lights, her auburn curls pinned with surgical precision, flanked by executives and photographers. She drew every eye in the room. The crowd erupted in applause. Keziah clapped too, stationed beside a fire extinguisher and a rack of forgotten umbrellas. Sophia passed within arm's reach, but her gaze never flickered toward her sister. Keziah raised a hand, then let it fall. A knot tightened in her chest, not grief, not anger, but a quiet compression, like her heart was holding its breath. She kept working, smiling as instructed, her fingers growing numb from the stack of programs. A memory surfaced. Unbidden. She was 10, Sophia 13, bundled in scarves in their old backyard in suburban Chicago. Keziah had spent hours building a lopsided snow fort, her small hands red from the cold. Sophia, laughing, had charged through with her sled, collapsing one wall. Why'd you do that? Keziah had asked, her voice muffled. Sophia yanked off her mittens. If you can't talk right, don't ruin it for everyone. The sting of that moment, buried for years, clawed its way back tonight. The hours dragged. Keziah's smile hardened into a mask. She overheard a colleague of Sophia's murmur. Her sister's helping at the door. That's sweet, sweet. Like she was a charity case. A prop to make Sophia's star burn brighter. Keziah scanned the banquet tables, searching for her name on the place cards. Nothing. No seat. No acknowledgement. She was meant to haunt the entrance. A ghost ushering the living into her sister's triumph. As the lights dimmed for the tribute video, Keziah slipped into the ballroom. Thanks to a server's discreet nod, she pressed against the back wall, the air heavy with lavender polish and overcooked salmon. Sophia took the stage, her voice smooth through the microphone, spinning a tale of early career struggles and the support from home that shaped her. Then, she turned toward Keziah, her smile gleaming like polished glass. "This is my sister, Keziah," she said, her tone warm but patronizing. "She's always been there for me. In her own quiet way. She doesn't hear well, so just smile and wave." The room chuckled, soft, polite, but sharp enough to cut. Keziah froze, her hands gripping the hem of her shirt to keep them still. Humiliation didn't roar, it settled. Heavy and still. Across the room, a man in a gray suit leaned toward Sophia. Keziah caught fragments of his words. "Family? I thought she was staff." Sophia's reply was swift. "Casual, kind of both. She likes to feel useful. Let's not confuse her." The words landed like a slap. But worse was the truth they carried. To Sophia, Keziah wasn't a sister. She was a tool, positioned just close enough to serve. Just far enough to never threaten. Something cracked inside her, not loud. Not violent. Just enough to shift the ground beneath her feet. Keziah slipped out of the ballroom. Her footsteps muffled on the carpeted hallway. She found a narrow corridor near the restrooms. Cooler, dimmer, a refuge from the perfume-soaked chaos. Her hand closed around the flash drive in her purse. Its edges sharp against her palm. On it was the truth. The original draft of the East Asia pitch that had clinched Sophia's promotion. Keziah had worked until 3 a.m., refining slides, pulling market data, crafting prose, all for a texted request. "Can you make this sound smarter?" Sophia had said, "Thanks," and claimed it as her own. Tonight, Keziah wasn't angry. She was tired of vanishing so Sophia could shine. A soft tap broke her thoughts. Olivia, a young woman from the comms team, stood there, holding out a glass of water. No words, just a gentle smile. Keziah nodded, her throat tight. For the first time that night, someone saw her, not as a project, not as a symbol, but as a person. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to Olivia. "Thanks for the water. You're the only one who's treated me like I'm actually here." She didn't send it, saving it to drafts. But as she stood in that quiet hallway, the weight of the flash drive pulsing in her pocket, Keziah knew something had shifted. They called her a gatekeeper. But tonight, she'd decide which doors stayed locked. The Lakewood Grand Hall pulsed with the rhythm of a carefully orchestrated triumph. Its velvet walls soaking up the clink of champagne flutes and the murmur of polished small talk. But beneath the glittering surface, a quiet rebellion was brewing. Keziah, 28, stood in the shadows of the ballroom. Her navy coat swapped for a black polo shirt that branded her deaf support volunteer, a role she hadn't chosen. A name tag that wasn't hers. Tonight, her sister Sophia's promotion was the centerpiece. But Keziah was about to rewrite the script. The air grew heavy as the lights dimmed, signaling the start of the tribute video. Keziah slipped into the ballroom, her presence unnoticed by the crowd settling into their seats. The screen flickered to life, painting Sophia's life in glowing vignettes. A child on a playground. A graduate clutching a diploma. A leader shaking hands with CEOs. The narration dripped with praise, visionary, mentor, heart-driven. Keziah's hands tightened around the flash drive in her pocket, its edges biting into her palm. She'd poured her nights into the East Asia pitch that had secured Sophia's rise, only to watch her sister claim it as her own. Now, her name was absent from the video, cropped from family photos, erased from the story. The applause swelled as the screen faded to black. But Keziah didn't clap. She moved, her steps steady, deliberate, toward the stage. Not the main entrance where speakers glided in, but a side stair, half hidden by a curtain. The crowd stirred, a ripple of confusion spreading as she crossed the platform. She didn't touch the microphone. She didn't meet Sophia's eyes, wide with a flicker of panic from the front row. Keziah stopped at the technician's laptop, placed the flash drive beside it, and nodded to Benji, a high school acquaintance turned assistant manager. His gaze met hers. Curious but trusting. Behind her, Olivia, the young comms team member who'd offered her water earlier, stepped forward unprompted. She tapped a few keys, and the screen roared back to life. No music, no voiceover, just slides. Keziah's slides. The original East Asia pitch. Timestamps intact. Author listed as Keziah Rowe. The audience leaned forward, eyes darting between the screen and Sophia. An overlay followed, showing Sophia's final version, identical structure. Copied visuals. Even a closing line Keziah had typed at 3 a.m. All I needed was a chance. The room didn't erupt. There were no gasps. Just a suffocating stillness. The CEO shifted in his seat. His glance at Sophia sharp. Evelyn, Keziah's mother, sat rigid, her lips a thin line. The applause that had begun to rise died, replaced by a silence louder than any cheer. Keziah didn't bow. She didn't smile. She turned and walked off the stage, her footsteps echoing in the hush. A single pair of hands clapped, a junior designer, barely 23, standing nervously before sitting back down. It was enough. Keziah reached the hallway, leaned against the cool plaster, and exhaled. She hadn't come to destroy Sophia. She'd come to claim herself. The night wasn't over. As Keziah crossed the parking lot, the cold Chicago wind biting her face, footsteps chased her. Evelyn's voice cut through the air, sharp and breathless. Keziah, stop. You humiliated your sister in front of her entire company. Keziah paused at the curb. The sky above a heavy gray. Snowflakes hovering but not yet falling. She turned slowly. Which family are we talking about? She asked. Her voice calm but unyielding. The one that doesn't even put me in the picture? Sophia stood a few steps behind, clutching her purse, her emerald gown catching the dim street light. Evelyn pressed on, her coat flaring. You've always been too sensitive. Sophia's built a name, a legacy, and you throw a tantrum because. Sophia stepped forward, her voice softer, almost pleading. You could have talked to me privately. Keziah's reply was steel. You don't do private, Sophia. You do public praise and private theft. The silence that followed was heavier than the wind. Keziah turned and walked to her car. The seatbelt buckle icy against her fingers. No one followed. No one knocked on her window. The quiet was perfect, a canvas of her own making. She opened her phone, found the draft she'd written to Olivia. Thanks for treating me like I was actually here, and hit send. Olivia's reply came instantly, anytime. Keziah's grip on the steering wheel loosened. A weight lifting not from victory, but from clarity. The next morning, Keziah stirred instant coffee in her small Chicago apartment. The clink of her spoon against the mug a gentle rhythm. Her phone buzzed. A message from Olivia. Check the internal memo board. Keziah opened the company portal. There, nestled among budget updates, was a quiet note from HR. Acknowledgement of an oversight in authorship for the Q3 international presentation. No names, no drama, just the truth, small but undeniable. Change didn't need a spotlight, it needed a foothold. Later that day, an email arrived, buried under spam. Subject: We'd still love to have you. Keziah. It was from a nonprofit she'd interviewed with years ago, back when she'd turned down the job to care for her grandmother. They'd seen her work, likely through whispers from Olivia's memo, and wanted her for a new role. Keziah read it twice, then closed her laptop. She didn't reply. Not yet. She wanted to sit with the feeling of being wanted for who she was, not who she propped up. By evening, Keziah walked downtown, the city draped in string lights, the sky heavy with unshed snow. She passed a gallery on 10th and Emerson, its windows fogged with warmth. A single frame stopped her, an empty canvas. A card below reading, the one who was always there. She snapped a photo, not for anyone else, but for herself. Back home, she texted Olivia. I'm skipping Sunday dinners. But if you want a real one, let's make it count. Olivia's reply was instant. Deal. You bring dessert. Keziah opened her journal, untouched for months, and wrote, This isn't revenge. This is reclamation. Below it, she added, I don't need their frame. I've built my own. To anyone who's ever felt invisible in their own story, Keziah's journey whispers a truth. Silence isn't peace, it's a delay. Your voice, however small, will find the stage. So, tell me, have you ever broken free from a role that wasn't yours? Dropped the mask to speak your truth? Share below, whether it's a single word or your whole story. I'm here, reading every one. If this resonated, Hit subscribe. More journeys are coming, and I want you with me.